We are going to create our first scripted utility. I hope you are excited. It will be a tool that fixes naming convention of our assets, and I decided to split this topic into two separate videos. I don't want to overload you, and I also want to make sure that you have nailed the basics. This video will teach you to create your first Hello World utility that prints something on the screen. It will introduce you to blueprints if you haven't worked with them before, show you how to declare events or functions that can be run in editor, and it will also teach you to filter assets that the utility can be launched on. And in the next video, we will focus on actually fixing naming convention of our assets. So I have a blank Unreal project. On the right side, you have some folder with example assets, and those are just assets from Starter content that you can get in Epic library. It's free. And on the left side, I have an empty folder, and that is where I will create my tool. So let's pick some folder, right mouse button inside, and let's select Editor Utilities and then Editor Utility Blueprint. We are going to create a utility that operates on assets, so we will pick Asset Action Utility. Let's name it BP underscore Hello World Tool. Double click to open Blueprint Editor and let's dock it here. If it is your first time working with blueprints, there are three main parts. The left side of the screen is some kind of an outliner. It is a list of all variables, functions, paths, and so on. And this section may also have details, but usually, as you can see, details are located on the right side of the screen. And now the only left thing is the middle. That's a big canvas where our blueprint logic will be created. I will usually call it graph or viewport, so it doesn't matter which way you call it. It's important that you know that I'm talking about this middle side of the screen. I said that we can run either events or functions. Event is some kind of a trigger that is meant to execute some code. It is something that may be executed when we click, when we edit text, when some timer finishes. And we can call those events ourselves from a different part of the logic, or they can be called by the editor itself. On the other hand, functions serve a different purpose. They are just a way to pack all those nodes that we are using very often into a single and reusable chunk. So this way you no longer have to copy and paste them, you just reuse the same function. It makes managing those nodes way easier, and if you decide to modify something or fix an issue in this smaller graph of nodes, all those uses of this function will be already fixed. So it really makes your life simpler, and it can be used to pack stuff that will be executed on the asset, but functions and events are two separate things. But that's the end of off topic. We'll have plenty of videos and we will be working both with events and functions, but I just wanted you to have the brief introduction. So let's start with an event. I'm going to right mouse button in my graph and let's search for custom event. It will let us add a new one and try to find some meaningful name because user will find our tool by exactly this name. So this is going to be a hello world, so maybe let's call it just hello world. And right now, if we compiled and saved this tool, this event would do nothing. It wouldn't be available in editor because we have to enable call in editor on this right side in the details panel. And if those details aren't showing to you for any reason, it means that you don't have this event selected. So just click on it. So call in editor, and it would be also nice to see if any logic is actually executed. It would be perfect to have something that prints on our screen. So right mouse button, and let's add a print string. And it may sound stupid to many of those of you who worked with blueprints before, but if you are new, you will have to learn working with blueprint flow. Our nodes have to be connected, and that creates some flow of execution. It's some order. So if my event is being executed, it doesn't trigger any nodes that are not connected to it. It triggers only the node that is directly connected after it. So we have to connect those little triangles. And now, if we wanted to trigger something else, like another print string, we would have to connect the previous one. And that's it. That is really similar to like making some river for some reason. That's what came to my mind. All right. Now we only have to click save and then compile. And don't forget about this compile. It is really important. And let's go back to our Word because that's where we have our content browser. And you may be tempted to right mouse button on our blueprint. And you will notice that there is run editor utility blueprint, and it will not work. Just click on it and nothing will be printed. And that is perfectly fine. We have to run it in a different way. So pick any asset. It can be our blueprint, but it can be also this example floor mesh. And we are not looking for run editor utility something. We are looking for a section called scripted asset actions. And that is where we will find our event. And as you can see, the name is exactly the same as in the editor. This is the name we picked. So let's press, and it is printing something in our viewport. I will click it again if you missed it, but also in output log. And that is really important because there is a chance that some of you have already some projects and it didn't print anything in the viewport. And that is perfectly fine. It is fine if it happened because your viewport settings didn't have real-time enabled. Many of you may disable it to have better performance if you have a busy scene. And let me disable it. Let me run this scripted asset action again. And as you can see, we have the third print here in the log, but nothing in the viewport. So before you start debugging, just make sure that the real time is enabled. All right. So we have a working event. What about functions? Let's create two of them because I will have some example to be shown. And we have this kind of outliner on the left side, function section. So let's add it with this plus button, and I will call it print A. There will be two functions, and I want to distinguish them. So there will be A and B. We need some print. And we have already printed hello. And if we did it again, we wouldn't be certain where this print is coming from. So we will change it to A. And that's it. And if we execute it right now, it will work actually, because if we select this function has call in the editor enabled by default. And that is pretty handy. Now let's add another function, print B. And let's also add a print string and connect it. Great. Now let's call it BBBBB. Save, compile, get back to content browser. And now if we right mouse button on this floor asset, go to scripted asset actions, we have all those three available. There is hello world, print A, and print B. So we can print A, maybe. Awesome. Hello world still works, and print B works. So before we jump into filtering assets by class, let me show you one more nice thing. Let's go back to this editor and let's imagine that we have a lot of functions. You may want to categorize them to navigate in this window easier, but you may also want to group them for the final user. So we may want to have a group called printer or something else. And the only thing we have to do is to select function and navigate to details and pick some category. By default, all those editor scripted utilities have either default category or assets, but adding a new one is just clicking in this box and typing some name. So we can assign this first to printer, and I want to show you that there are two categories. So it will be just maybe logger or renamer, literally anything. So it already is foldable here, which is nice. But if we save and compile, we can see that here in Content Browser, it also is divided into separate groups, which is really nice. So now we're going to the final thing that we want to learn. And what is our scenario? Let's think about use case and then about explanation. We have something that should operate only on meshes. So we don't want this editor tool to execute on textures or materials. Or maybe we have some thing that export textures. In that case, it will operate only on textures. And that is why we want to filter by the class. So let's go back to our editor. And now on the top shelf, there is class defaults button. When you click it, it will pop in the details, and in asset support section, there is something like supported classes. So if I want to support only static meshes, I have to search for static mesh. Don't be discouraged by this huge list. You just have to scroll a bit lower and you will find static mesh. So now let's save and compile. And on my floor asset, we have those three: printer, renamer, hello world, but we don't have it on the blueprint. And if we wanted to have it on the blueprints or maybe on editor utility actions, we could search for editor utility action asset. I always mix up this name, but yeah, it is editor utility blueprint. Once it is saved and compiled, it will be both available on our blueprint, on our floor, but I made it pretty specific that I want it only on editor utility blueprints and not regular blueprints, so I can create some actor blueprint and it will no longer be available. On the other hand, we can try and see what will happen if I change this class to just blueprint. And we have to make sure that something like that exists. And yeah, it does. Now save, compile, get back here. And it is available on this blueprint. And it is also available on our editor utility. And why did that happen? It is because in code or in Blueprint's hierarchy, we have some classes that inherit from each other. And that is exactly the same case that we have with all those editor actor and asset utilities. They are two separate classes, but they are based on editor utility blueprint class. And in some way, editor utility blueprint inherits at some point from the blueprint class. And that's why. So to sum up, we just learned how to create a simple editor utility that can be executed on assets. Now you know how to filter the kinds of assets that can be processed by this tool. And you also know how to add more functions or events to be executed. The next step will be to create some batch renamer that fixes naming convention. And that is exactly the topic we will talk about in next video.